Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today had a big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. What an interesting day today has been. Paul Ryan, who he's been kind of, tippy-toeing around. He's been kind of, leaving the signs out there. The thought was, conventional wisdom was, he was going to run for re-election and immediately resign. Didn't want to give up the Republican seat, wanted to make sure that the GOP held that seat. Increasingly looking like wasn't going to happen. Ryan said, must have thought, you know what? Not going to go through a hard-fought battle, a long campaign, not going to go raise all that money, spend all the money, only to end up giving up at the other end. And oh, by the way, possibly getting your hat handed to you. And I would argue that was looking more and more likely as the train wreck continues to happen in front of us, especially when you had a real opponent in Iron Stash who's raised a considerable amount of money. Look, I mean, the guy who ran against him last year or 2 years ago raised like $20,000. Iron Stash has come up with like $5 million. He is going to run. He would have run a formidable campaign. But one of the things that's interesting to me about Paul Ryan, and he's always been one of those guys that has infuriated me, because the one thing we have in common is that we both lost a parent when we were younger, and we both benefited from Social Security's survivor benefit. I look at that moment as, it was a good thing. It helped my grandparents support me. It helped my grandparents put food on the table, a roof over my head, give me opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise had. Paul Ryan, I believe, looks at it as, well, I paid for his college, but he looks at it as, something of a stain, if you will, and something to be kind of ashamed of, which is the only thing that I can come up with why he would spend his college years, basically doing keg stands, dreaming about the day when he could destroy Medicare and Medicaid. It makes no sense. And here is a guy who has, like I said, his teen years made decent money off of Social Security. Guy who went to public schools, used that Social Security money to pay for the public university that he went to. He is going to retire with a public pension. For more than 25 years, he collected a public paycheck, yet he absolutely hates the public. I mean, it's one of those things where if that's your belief structure, if you despise everything about government, about the public sector, why are you in it? How much do you feel that, for the last, 25 years, you've been on the dole? Because I can't point to anything, and I'll be honest, fortunately, I can't really point to anything that he really wanted to do that he got accomplished. And I know he said that, he's retiring because of all of his accomplishments. And of course, the generic, I want to stay home with my family. But fortunately, he didn't get the wet dream moments that he wanted, which was to entirely destroy our social safety net, which is to destroy Social Security, to destroy Medicare, to destroy Medicaid, to eviscerate food stamps, to end SNAP benefits, to do away with any type of help for people in need. And again, it's one of these self-loathing things that, as a kid, when his father passed away, it was the government who came in and helped out. I mean, it's one of those bizarre kind of ironic kind of things. And now you look at yesterday. Yesterday in the dark of the evening hours, while no one hopefully was paying attention, the Trump administration, Trump signed another executive order. And look, I'm not a huge fan of executive orders. I remember during the Obama years, he used them extensively to make things better, to help people, like increase labor standards, do something on climate change, something on immigration. Every one of his executive orders, as I go back and remember, and I'm sure there was one that maybe someone, no, this is wrong. All of them moved us forward, moved the bar a little bit forward, gave people a little bit extra, a little help. What Trump did last night was to sign an executive order that's basically going to allow the federal government to look at what programs that we aid the poor with and do whatever you can do to destroy them. Drug testing, work requirements, all of that conservative stuff that they've just been dying for. Now on the table. Now tools that governors across the state who want to be little Trumps can pursue. And the interesting thing to me, and it's one of these moments where when you look at what the Republicans have done masterfully, what they really do well, they really know how to, and Trump's a master at this. They can really hone in on what divides us. They can really hone in on what they know people are going to be upset about. And then they pick at that and they pick at that to cause the division. And they've really done this well. I mean, you go back to the 80s and Ronald Reagan with the welfare queen. She was driving around in a Cadillac, eating steak every night, drinking Dom Perignon on your dime. And yet they never found her. She was a mythical character that they actually dreamt up. Now, were there people cheating welfare? Sure, there are people cheating welfare. But are they driving around in Cadillacs, eating steak, drinking Dom? No. The real welfare cheats, well, they're in our corporate boardrooms, but we don't ever want to talk about that. Because, well, they're the deserving welfare queens. And this is one of those moments where this executive order is going to exacerbate that tension. Because it's those undeserving, the lazy and the shiftless, those people who they just want to lay around all day. Never mind the fact that there aren't any jobs around. Never mind the fact that childcare is an obstacle. Never mind the fact that transportation is an obstacle. Never mind the fact that, well, education is an obstacle because we've defunded public education, especially in those urban areas and those way out rural areas where poor people tend to congregate. Never mind all of that. They're just lazy and shiftless. Because, hey, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, and I get this nonsense all the time from people. Well, I did it myself. No, you really didn't. You had institutional help. You had a family basis that could give you opportunities that most of these people don't get. And I started thinking about it today as I was just banging around between my ears, and I was remembering, when I was a kid, where I grew up, we weren't on the bus line. So any job that you could get had to be within walking distance or within biking distance if you didn't have a car. And most people didn't. And the people who did have a car, they were crappy cars. They were always breaking down. And for those who remember the 1970s, flat tires happened all the time. And yet we seem to forget that. And, like myself personally, right now, I'm going through a car emergency of my own. Transmission went on my Jeep, $4,000 repair. How many people in this country can absorb a $4,000 repair and not have it alter their lives? Now imagine if you're at the bottom end, you're on SNAP to feed the kids, you're getting Medicaid, you're getting some cash assistance at the bottom because, hey, you're trying to figure out how to keep a roof over your head. Imagine what a gone transmission in your clunker means. It means no more going to the job. It means now you lose the job, especially because we don't have efficient public transportation. My wife and I took the kids a couple of years back to Disneyland, and I'm going, amazing, wherever it is down in Florida, Land or World or whatever it is. Amazing public transportation. You never waited more than 15 minutes for a bus to take you somewhere. And I remember going, why can't we have this in society? Why does it have to be so cumbersome to use public transportation? It should be the buses run every 10, 15 minutes. You can get where you need to go in a reasonable amount of time and at a reasonable cost so that those barriers aren't there. But yet again, as I keep coming back to, we need to have a poverty class that we can abuse. We need to have a class of people that we can bring out into public and shame. We need to have a class of people that we can hold up on a, I'm not going to say a pedestal, but hold up in front of everybody and go, see, this could be you if you don't work harder. Crack the whip, back to work. Yeah, we know those wages have fallen. We know the benefits are gone. We know that you're working harder and longer, but that could be you. And you can sing it with me. Come on, everybody sing along. At least we have a job. Heard that all during the recession. And when they get us thinking that way, then they throw the red meat out in front of us. There are lazy people among us. They're not pulling their weight. It's a way to divide. And then you say, which are the Democrats who want everybody to be lazy. They're all shiftless. They're all no good. None of them want to work. And yet, I got to be honest, some of the hardest working people I know are Democrats. Most workaholics that I know are Democrats because they're trying to work much harder to get ahead. And they don't get the tax breaks. I mean, that's part of it. But, I started thinking about all of this stuff. And, I'm going through remembering, as a kid growing up and seeing the divide. And look, I was probably one of the only white kids in an all-black neighborhood and realized very young, white and black didn't matter. The only color that really mattered was green because we didn't have it. Now, I remember when I was a kid, they used to give you food stamps. You get these clown dollars. They look like cartoon money. And you'd have to take them to the store and have the clerk scrutinize everything that you bought. And again, more public shaming. And I was like 8 years old, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. And if the old woman, I'm sure, is long gone now, and if someone told me where they buried her, I would dig her up to kill her again. But she held up something that I had wanted. And, is this something that he can buy in front of a whole crowd of people? It was the most humiliating, most embarrassing moment of my life. And it was an angering moment. And, I said, even then, this is not something that should ever happen to anyone. Anyone ever. So when I see Trump doing this and I see this, we know this is for the election. We know this is to divide people. We know this is to throw red meat out. We know it's not going to do any good adding a work requirement to welfare or food stamps or Medicaid. We know that because, oh, God, by the way, about 3/4 of the people on Medicaid actually do work. So myth gone. And those who don't are generally people who are disabled or ill or, heaven forbid, single mothers staying home with their children because they can't get quality child care. And it's always interesting to me that the right wing, they love to attack poor mothers who stay home with their children. But because they're lazy and shiftless, of course. But they also shame middle-class women who go into the workforce for not staying home with their children. Really just a very bizarre thing. But again, it's all about shaming. It's all about dividing. It's all about pitting us against one another. And the hope is that we see through this come November. Just my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Are you for the idea of a work requirement? Should it be a mandate? Or, as I've always said, because look, I'm not anti-work. Should we have a program that says, you know what? If you can't find a job, government will be the employer of last resort. Because I do believe everyone should work. The question is, how do you get people there? How do you help them take care of their children? And how do we get them the health care and the security that they need to exist? I know, that's too much. It's much easier to go get a job, lazy person. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Own 90% of the wealth, 10% of the people. Own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people. Own 90% 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day New York City transit workers in TWU Local 100 ended their 11-day walkout. The strike occurred in the context of hard times for New York City workers. The city had teetered on the edge of municipal bankruptcy just a few years earlier. Unrelenting inflation and austerity measures against municipal workers had taken its toll. Years of recession meant freezes in hiring and promotions. It also meant increasingly dangerous working conditions. The MTA cut back funding for basic maintenance, investment, and service. Derailments, accidents, and fires were common, and crime soared at stations and bus stops. Transit workers found themselves operating malfunctioning equipment and confronted by frustrated and angry riders. With wages frozen, cost of living adjustments or COLA capped, and the establishment of a 3-tiered pension plan, workers had had enough. They walked out on the first day of the month, demanding a 30% wage increase, quarterly COLA, and increased vacation time. New York City Mayor Ed Koch opposed the workers' demands, fearing any victory for the union would ruin upcoming contract negotiations with the city's 300,000 municipal workers. He also used the strike as an occasion to whip up anti-union sentiment. While the contract was voted up by a 3-1 margin, labor historian Joshua Freeman notes that the 1980 strike ended up in victory that many transit workers saw as a defeat. Workers won a 17% wage increase over 2 years, a 3% cost of living adjustment, and increased contributions to the health and welfare fund. But they also had to concede to reduced breaks, 2-tiered wages, and increased job duties across classifications. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
We all learn with workers' blood. The mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities to the farmlands and trenches full of mud. 'Cause war has always been the boss's way, sir. Come on, the union forever defending our rights. Let's fight the right wing, our workers unite. With our brothers and our sisters from many far-off lands.
Yes, there is power in a union, absolutely. And you're seeing this all across the country. Look, you're seeing all of these teachers out in the streets from West Virginia to Kentucky to Arizona to Oklahoma. All across the country, people are finally, I think, waking up to the reality that, you know what, we've had enough already. Now, understand, the power and interest, the Republicans in control of a lot of these general assemblies and governor's offices, they're not going to go quietly into that good night. They've stolen enough for themselves and their corporate special interests, and it's going to be a fight. And I look at what's going on in Kentucky again, as they've been pushing for better pay for their public workers and protecting their pensions. You've got just this insanity. I mean, it's just nuts to me. But I understand Friday there's going to be a big rally. There's a big action. That's why I have asked Katie Hancock to come talk with us. She's a Kentucky State employee, also a member of Kentucky United We Stand. Katie, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So what's going on Friday? What's the big news?
So Friday is the last 2 days of this legislative session. It's the last time that any significant change can be made without either going into a government shutdown or having a special session. So it's a pretty big deal that, those are the last 2 days that we have any chance to make anything happen. So as of right now, our governor has vetoed the budget bill and the revenue building bill, and he has signed into law the pension bill, which is Senate Bill 151, which we refer to as the sewage bill, because that was the piece that was, in the dark of night, kind of snuck in on an amendment on a sewage bill. But that's what the bill was for, was actually sewage bill, and it's kind of fitting, given that it's pretty much a crappy bill.
Yeah, it is fitting, and I guess here's the thing: it shows exactly what the administration thinks of its employees.
Absolutely. That could not have been a clearer message if they had tried. I mean, it is clear exactly what they think of us. Absolutely.
So now, where do we see this going? I mean, as it looks like your governor is dug in, you've got a Republican legislature. Where do you see this going in the coming days after Friday? Then,
I really don't know. It's probably one of the craziest things I've ever seen. I mean, even people from all aspects are like, I've just never really seen anything like this. That there's been, the progress that was made in the budget it is better than what the governor proposed, but it's still really bad. And now we're in a kind of a quandary of what to do. Should we advocate for the legislators to veto that so we actually have a budget and we know exactly what we're getting, or do we advocate for them to not veto it and start over again? And it's a tough call, because if we know what we've got, we know what we've got. If we don't, we're subject to some things that could be a lot worse. And we know the one thing that we absolutely know with certainty is that our governor hates us. He has no respect for us. He has no plans to make things better for us. So I can only think that it would be worse. And so it's really stressful. It's very, people are very emotional about it. There's kind of there's a divide on what's the right way to go about this, and I don't know what to do either. It's a mess.
Yeah, you're kind of backed into a corner where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But
you're exactly right.
But at the end of it, I mean, it's going to come down to what the people on the ground are feeling and what they're thinking, and as a state, do you want to be one that attacks your workers? Do you want to be in a situation where you have the kind of things that you see going on there?
Absolutely, and that's the thing that I think there's a little bit of a disconnect, because what some of the larger society, or even in our own Commonwealth, the people who are in favor of these things don't realize that they're attacking the very people that our state depends on. Like our police officers and our firefighters and our social workers and our teachers. These are the people that in any kind of given crisis, they depend to save their lives or to protect their children or to teach their children. But then they're okay with just saying, sorry, you're not a value. You're only a value when we need you, not when they need us. I mean, it's like it can't go both ways,
Right.
So it's really a bad feeling, that when you have somebody who's so anti-you that you're like, you depend on us. You could not function. The state absolutely could not function without the services that are provided by the very people that are being attacked right now.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is what Republicans have done masterfully, and their corporate special interests have done as well, is they've created this divide. And it's now public sector workers versus private sector workers, because look, they stole private sector workers' pensions years ago. They gutted the defined benefit plan years and years ago. In fact, stole most of it and ended up dumping it all on the back of the PBGC to where you get like 40% of your pension. So you've got an entire workforce of people who are just furious, and they need someone to take it out on. And what the right wing does masterfully is they fed you guys up as the red meat on a silver platter.
You're exactly right, and because that is a lot of what that's what the governor is saying. He's saying that same thing himself, is that, well, the private sector doesn't have pensions. He's trying to treat a government agencies like a business, and that's not. Those things don't coincide. They're not the same thing. And
but the other side of this is, you took these jobs, which were lower paying jobs than the private sector. You took these jobs knowing that you were going to make less money, but you were going to have a pension and something to retire on. Not to mention the other part of it that, I just found out about Kentucky not too long ago, that you guys don't get Social Security. So by changing this whole thing, don't you upset the entire retirement system of virtually every person who's worked for the state?
Absolutely. Now, so state employees actually do receive, some of them do, like firefighters, some of those don't receive Social Security either, neither do teachers, but state employees actually do receive Social Security when they get to that point. But again, we've all made, we're making tens and thousands of dollars less a year than the private sector jobs. There's not any extra money to put into savings and into 401ks and all these kinds of things, which is what they're telling us we need to do. there's not any extra money. We can barely pay our bills as it is. And yes, we made that choice. And I hear that argument all the time. You made a choice, stick with it. Well, we did make a choice. We made a choice on a commitment that we made to provide services to our state. And with that, our people, our state made a commitment to us too, and they need to honor that commitment.
Yeah, I mean, that argument is one of the most idiotic arguments I've ever heard. Well, you chose to take a crummy job. You chose it, so you could just leave if you don't like it. I go, the other side of this is, how about we take the crummy job and we make it a better job? How about we improve things for everybody? That's I don't know if that's a foreign concept today. I don't know if that's something that's been bred out of us. But, I listen to the people who say, wow, I don't have a defined benefit. They shouldn't either. I go, flip that around. Say, they've got it. Why don't I? When do we start thinking about making us all better instead of tearing us all down?
I don't know. And that's such a valid question, because I can't wrap my mind around it either. It's like, revenue for the state benefits everybody in the state. It's like if you were to legalize marijuana or legalize gambling, or start having taxes on horse sales in Kentucky, which we're known for, then that revenue doesn't just go to my pension. It goes to the whole state, and it benefits everybody. And I can't understand that mindset of, well, if you don't have it, then nobody else needs to have it either. If I don't have it, nobody else deserves it. I just can't wrap my mind around that.
Yeah, it's a bizarre frame of mind, and I've struggled with it, for the last several years, and just how well the right wing has pitted us against one another, and got us to I go back to the old railroad magnate Jay Gould, who said I could easily pay half the country to kill the other half. I guess that mentality is on display front and center right now.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's very disheartening, and it makes me question, like, what kind of world am I raising my children in? That they would be that selfish, that they would think so much. And I it's funny that our governor says that he thinks that his opinions are some of the things that have broke down the morality of our nation. But I'm kind of thinking that his mentality is actually what is the breakdown here. It's not people like me who are destroying it. It's people like him that are so greedy, and that's not very Christ-like.
Yeah, no, I keep hearing we're a Christian nation. I go, maybe someday we'll act like it. But, here's the thing. I see all these people in Congress who are retiring, and I see a lot of these politicos who are getting out of the game because, well, they can't get anything done. And I'm going, well, because your ideas are radical. What is going on in this country right now is a radical departure from what made us a prosperous country, especially when you talk about a prosperous working class. The ideas that they're shoveling, the nonsense that they're pushing, it's radical. I mean, it's a radical departure and an attempt to undo the entire 20th century.
It really is. There's a lot of people who, I try very hard not to make this a partisan issue just because that's required with my job. And, I try very hard. But I do see the messaging out there, and I do see that so many people are like, I was a long-term Republican, and I will never vote Republican again. I've changed my party. I've seen people say, I voted for this governor, and he has betrayed me. He sent messages out to the schools and the teachers and state employees, for that matter, because we all vote. We're all taxpayers. We actually get out and vote. And he sent messages the night before his election and promised that he wasn't going to do the very thing that he is doing. And they're shocked and amazed. And I'm like, I don't know how that could happen myself. I mean, I'm a studier of human nature, and that's not what I took from him when I was studying him, in his history and his campaign. But, a lot of people really feel betrayed by him.
No, I mean, you look at this, and here's the thing. It's just not Kentucky. It's just not Governor Bevin. It's not just not your backyard. This is the playbook across the country. And, to me, this consolidation of power by people who are radical and the moneyed interests that back them, that, to me, is what's the most scary thing.
Oh, you're not even kidding. There's a fundraiser. So several months ago, that these 19 business leaders being part of had sent this letter saying, we want it to be privatized. We want this kind of more of a private kind of pension system. We want them to pay 401ks. We don't have pensions, so let's make it like the rest of everybody else. And that was signed by one of the owners of the Fork Bank. And he's hosting a fundraiser for a candidate for the Supreme Court of Kentucky. And I'm like, what's his motivation here? They're trying to buy a judgeship. I mean, this is how deep it goes. It's not, and that's not a conspiracy theory. It's reality.
No, and it's happened in other states, Katie. I mean, you look at West Virginia. You had the rumor that Don Blankenship bought a Supreme Court, a court seat there. None of this stuff is new. And look, you go back to 100 years in our history, it's the exact same thing that happened back when you had this mass inequality that we suffer from today. When you have a group of people who have an enormous amount of wealth, what do they do with it? Well, they abuse their power with it, and they consolidate power. We have the best democracy money can buy.
And the other thing that kills me with that mindset is that a lot of the people who support that mentality are not the people who have all that money. They just think that they are somehow better because they have more. That doesn't make them better. It just makes them greedier, and they have advantages that the rest of us don't have. But for somebody who is completely, working class, that would support somebody like, a leader who is completely opposed to the working class, I just cannot even understand that. I just cannot even wrap my mind around it.
It's amazing to me. So let me ask you, how can we help? Friday, you got the big rally. As you said, it's the end of the legislative session. Is there something we can do? Are there phone calls we can make? What are the marching orders?
At this point, I think that just the fact that you're aware of what's going on has been tremendous. That we're getting national coverage on this too. We're hearing that people are supporting us. We've had the Oklahoma folks and the West Virginia folks. They've sent pictures to us. Said we've got your back. We're here with you. And and I think that's the best thing that we can have right now is just to know that other states are watching and that they're supporting us.
Just that idea of solidarity. That we're
Absolutely.
all in this together.
Absolutely. I tell you, that's been the most profound thing for me with all of this is just that unity that comes when people stand together. It's just been, I get chills just even thinking about it.
Good stuff. Katie, I wish you guys the best, and I'd love to have you come back and tell us how things work out as this continues down the road.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Thanks so much, Katie Hancock, public employee there in the state of Kentucky, also a member of Kentucky United We Stand. And look, I wish them nothing but the best. And as I've said in the past, we stand with them 100%. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
A union man for the firefighters, my friend. And the kids locked in the Capitol. The end. And we're not gonna break tonight. And we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down. But I asked around. And everybody said, this is a union town. A union town. All down the line, this is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that labor organizer Frank Norman disappeared from the Lakeland, Florida area and was never heard from again. It's believed he was kidnapped and murdered by members of the Ku Klux Klan. Norman was organizing citrus workers in the northern part of the state. The citrus groves, cigar factories, and textile mills in the area maintained a highly segregated workforce. The Klan terrorized workers and labor organizers that dared to disrupt this segregation by attempting to organize workers across racial lines. Klan members marched in parades through workers' neighborhoods and burnt crosses near union meetings. The next year, another union organizer, Joseph Shoemaker, was kidnapped by the Klan. Shoemaker had come to Florida from Vermont to organize cigar workers. 44 Klan members took Shoemaker and 2 other men 14 miles into the woods outside of Tampa. Shoemaker's leg was plunged into boiling hot tar. He was beaten and tortured and left for dead. When he was found, doctors tried to save his life by amputating his leg. But after 9 agonizing days, he died from his injuries. The investigation into the crime showed collaboration between the Klan and the local police. 5 policemen were convicted and sentenced to just 4 years in jail for their role in the terror attack. But the next year, their sentences were overturned and they were released. No one was ever held accountable for the murders of Norman or Shoemaker. These 2 men and countless others forgotten by history gave their lives trying to organize workers and stand up for racial justice. The Klan terrorized union organizers across the South in states like Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show. Issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I got news for you, and it's going down. Before you come home and tell me you're not angry, and I'll be leaving town.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. So, not a lot going on today. Kind of a boring, slow news day. No big announcements. Nothing really to talk about. So let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. or not going on. Let's hit up with Justin Duckham, senior White House correspondent there at Talk Media News. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here. I have nothing else going on today. Just a total snooze fest.
Yeah, I mean, the whole announcement that the Speaker of the House, you know what? Better things to do.
I mean, it's not that big of a deal. I've gone through about 3 speakers in my time here. So, yeah, no, this certainly has been driving the day over here. This was a bit of a surprise. There was a lot of reporting previously saying that he had been feeling this out with colleagues, some speculation that he may be leaving. But today he did make it official and announced that he was not going to be seeking re-election come November. This is the latest Republican, but certainly the highest profile one, and something that speaks volumes about how difficult it has been to essentially rein in the House. And despite the fact that, Paul Ryan's been denying it, probably a pretty good sign that Republican leadership are expecting to, lose seats and perhaps control of the lower chamber come the elections.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats need to pick up, I think it's 24 seats in order to gain control. And it looks like, I think there are something like 43 that are either resigned under disgrace, retired, or are moving on to try other offices. So there's a lot of seats up in play this November.
There certainly are. This has been a pretty surprising election cycle in terms of who are leaving. And these aren't just sort of rank and file people. These are big names. Jeb Hensarling left. Paul Ryan, of course, is the big one. Trey Gowdy, who has been a very well-known Republican from the Benghazi era and the, Clinton grilling and whatnot. So not just, rank and file, but the big names in the party, the big leadership in the House, they're leaving too, which is probably more significant than just the sheer numbers of it.
No, I look at someone like Ryan. I look at someone like Gowdy. These were the young up and comers. These were supposed to be the the next wave of of leadership. Higher ups, and they're leaving. In fact, Gowdy didn't he recently say it was like the whole time there was a waste of time?
Pretty much, yeah. He said that he did not really accomplish that much during his 7 years there, sort of shedding light on the fact that a lot of what he was doing was basically just being there to make good TV and to pretty much play a pit bull, in front of the television cameras, but acknowledging that there just wasn't much when it came to policy, and that's something that Paul Ryan kind of touched on today as well. He said that they had a lot of accomplishments to look back on. But, ultimately that goes down to, tax reform, or the tax cuts, as the president likes to call it, but does not include the white whale for Paul Ryan, which was entitlement reforms. And, frankly, he kind of had to stretch today, citing, military spending as one of his top accomplishments, even though that's not something that, has really been synonymous with Paul Ryan in the past. So, yeah.
No, what's interesting is, because I was sitting thinking of his legacy today, and his legacy really is, twofold. There's the one side where he got huge tax cuts for the very wealthy. They really did a masterful job of enriching the wealth class. and then attacking the poor. I mean, that's really going to be what his legacy is, attacking all of the social safety net programs, his want of I remember the keg stands over cutting Medicare and Medicaid. You go, not much there. So what do you think he's going to be remembered as? What kind of a speaker, or will he be remembered, or will he just be the guy who was somewhere between John Boehner and the next guy?
I mean, I think he's going to historically be linked to Trump. He had to walk that fine line of being Speaker of the House and being somebody who, as we've seen time and time again, couldn't really stand up very hard with Trump. Couldn't bring him along when it comes to, trying to get him behind some of the conservative ideology that Paul Ryan has pushed for quite some time. That's probably the last thing that he wants to be remembered for. I have this sense that he probably wanted to be there to carry on these big things, to take out this, conservative ideology and have it be respected by a president. And instead he just, had somebody who was not really a big thinker and just didn't really mesh with Paul Ryan. So I think it's kind of a wasted opportunity for him, and one that is going to have him be remembered for things that he would probably prefer not to be.
Now, are you surprised that he bailed on this? I mean, there was a lot of talk he was going to run through the election because there was there's a chance that he was going to beat Randy Bryce. Now it looks like that could be a seat that's just going to be handed to the Democrats because they've been on the ground for a year now. They've been raising money like crazy. They've got I would have to argue a huge lead over whoever's next.
Yeah, I mean, Steel Stash has been listed as somebody who is a formidable challenger. That's been put out before. The fact that he is getting a lot of grassroots support, particularly with the status as the person who's going up against Paul Ryan. So I guess ultimately I'm surprised, but I also understand why. Being Speaker of the House at this period of time just must absolutely suck. You have a caucus that doesn't respect you. You have, a conference that just doesn't get along, that's split between, the rank and file and the Freedom Caucus, who are, pretty much emboldened by the president. And, you are wasting all this time. You're spending a lot of, man hours trying to right the ship, but ultimately you just don't have people who are willing to play along. So, there are a lot of times that you hear politicians saying that they want to leave and spend time with their family. This time I do believe it, just because it came down to trying to, head the House Republican Conference at this period in time, or spend time with my family. It's sort of a no-brainer.
Yeah, you're absolutely. At this point, it's a no-brainer because look, he couldn't get anything done. And I look at Trey Gowdy's district, where I guess there's like 3,000 people running to replace him. I think it's only 15, but none of them want the Chamber of Commerce's endorsement. Which you go, just how far has the Republican Party gone off the rails when they don't want the Chamber of Commerce, when the Chamber of Commerce is too moderate and hippie liberal for them?
I mean, it's the midterm elections, and that's always sort of an interesting year in the sense that you get people who really motivate their respective bases, and we're seeing that a lot in both parties. We are seeing people who are running on the left as far away from Trump as humanly possible, getting a lot of traction. And then on the right, we're seeing a lot of these contests where it's basically, playing games to see who could be viewed as, a mini Trump or Trump light. And in that instance, those people are doing pretty well. And, we could see that in Wisconsin. There's Paula Nellen, who is a person who uses a lot of anti-Semitic language and whatnot, who I guess is still running to try to fill that seat. But it's gonna be an interesting next 6 months to see where exactly the chips fall.
Most certainly going to be an interesting time moving forward. Let's move along. There is absolutely a tweet for everything nowadays, and I look at the president came out today. It looked like warned Russia that missiles were coming, and there was a tweet a couple of years back that said, it's idiotic to tell people what you're doing, and if he was going to bomb anyone, he wouldn't tell him. It's just interesting that there really is a tweet to contradict everything that Trump says or does.
It's bizarre, right? And it's not just contradicting what he said on Twitter. It's contradicting what the White House has been saying since he assumed office. As soon as he announced the Syrian plans, I sort of went through my inbox and went through the transcripts of the press briefings, and I was able to piece together about 40 solid seconds of administration officials saying that the president doesn't, telegraph his plans in just little brief snippets. That's something that's been said by Tom Bossert, something that's been said by H.R. McMaster, something that's been said by Raj Shah, the deputy press secretary, something that's been said by Sarah Huckabee Sanders as well. So that's just sort of been the line of this administration, and now it's sort of tossed out. Today Sarah Sanders was asked about that, and she basically said that it's different from previous ones because the president hasn't given a timeline. But, of course, earlier this week we saw him saying 24 to 48 hours for decision action. So it just makes no sense and boggles the mind and just raises the fact that, this is a president who's not really following any sort of Trump doctrine.
The Trump doctrine is chaos.
It's an ad hoc presidency.
Oh, my gosh. And, I got to be honest, I've said this about Sarah Huckabee Sanders a number of times in the past. I don't know if she thrives on and just wakes up every day, can't wait to do what she does, because she does do it well, the deflecting, the not answering questions, the, just being a total snot, or if she reaches for a bottle and a razor blade every day. I mean, I got to tell you, there's part of me that would be reaching for a bottle every day if I had to defend the nonsense coming out of this administration.
I mean, back during the Sean Spicer era, when he stopped doing on-camera briefings for a good chunk of time, it really looked like he was sort of feeling the toll of it. He would come out on the off-camera days and look, particularly when there was news about him, possibly being fired, and just look ashen. It just felt like you were attending a funeral when the cameras were off. Sanders has stopped doing that, so, it's kind of harder to read the language since she is being, observed by the audience of one that she speaks to, the president. So it's kind of it's a lot harder to read than it was with the previous guy.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I would just be reaching for the bottle constantly. I mean, or what's that old saying? Give me a lobotomy or put a bottle in front of me. One of them. Just I don't know how you get up every morning to do what she does. Good for her, I guess. And finally, the drum beats. We've been hearing it for a while. Does Mueller get fired by the end of the week, as I think it might happen?
I mean, it's certainly looking that way. Trump went ballistic following the raid on Michael Cohen's office, saying that this was an attack on the country, saying that this was a total witch hunt, and that the Mueller investigation has gone too far, despite the fact that this was something that was just carried out with a referral from Mueller and not Mueller himself. Trump also used that opportunity to go after Rod Rosenstein, so it looks like there could be some pretty significant changes. The Trump private lawyers the White House lawyer Ty Cobb has said, that there's no talk about Mueller. Congressional leaders have said that that's not the case. But today, Sanders deflected on that. And then yesterday she made the frankly bizarre claim that members of the DOJ officials have advised the White House that Trump would be able to basically fire Mueller unilaterally. That's a pretty bold statement and a new shift in this, ongoing rumor mill, and one that should be a sort of a sign of very serious concern for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, you've got Lindsey Graham who's saying it's the end. It's the beginning of the end, which, there's part of me that goes, will the Republican Party come along, or will they just,
I mean, Trump is basically the Teflon president, and he was a Teflon candidate. He's been, there's been moves that he's done that, as people have said, were going to be the end of him for quite some time now. But lo and behold, he won the election. Lo and behold, he's still here despite the fact that he's carried out steps that in any other administration would have raised huge ethical red flags and, seen him tossed out. When it comes to annulment clause, when it comes to hiring his kids, when it comes to just all these weird little things. Supporting Scott Pruitt is another one that just, no other administration would that have been acceptable. So, it's probably true that, yeah, it'll cause some outrage, but, so far nothing's been able to stop him, and he's shown that the laws just don't apply to him, in the sense that if they don't have teeth, they're not going to pretty much derail him. So I think statements from Lindsey Graham like that are a little bit too optimistic.
Yeah, because I just don't see the rest of the Republican Party doing anything. I know people are saying, the Democrats have to stand strong. It doesn't matter what the Democrats do. They're not in power. They're not they don't drive the agenda, which again, why November so very important. Any predictions? What's the word on the street? Because look, I see all of these headlines of, Trump wanted to fire him back in December. Trump wanted to fire him back in June. Trump's wanted to fire him since the day that he was appointed, since the day this started. So I don't know what all the breathless headlines are about. It's been something that's been constantly on his mind. But what are you hearing from folks, as you're listening to people in the back rooms?
There's a sense that it's going to probably happen. Maybe not this week, but it's becoming a much more realistic possibility than it was just a couple of weeks ago.
And then that means it doesn't go away, though. I mean, all the stuff that Mueller's put together, someone can pick up, right? I mean, Congress can pick up in November.
I mean, again, that also that would rely upon the political will being there to do it. If Democrats win the House and Republicans keep the Senate, that's going to raise some challenges as well. So it's really just too soon to say how exactly Congress can react to this or what steps we can, expect to be taken out. For his part, Rosenstein said that he is not going to do it unless if there is cause, which is written in the, sort of, I guess, regulations for dealing with the special counsel. But at this point, Rosenstein seems like it could be on his way out as well. He got the infamous I have no personnel announcements to make today from Sarah Sanders, which is usually the, precursor to somebody being fired. So we're, it's a very good possibility that we are on the brink of a constitutional crisis, and that should be, concerning.
Yay, fun. Good stuff.
Yep.
Justin, appreciate the time, man.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Radio of for.
The world keeps telling me to get a grip or I won't last. Gotta break away from solitude and let go of my past. I've never found it easy to change my stubborn ways or to gain perspective, throw away those soulless days. We have struggled, we have prayed, we're still searching for something more. We have struggled, we still pray, we're looking for the chance.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So you remember the other day, April Ryan, she's a correspondent for the American Urban Radio Network. She asked what was, kind of an interesting question. Has Trump, considered resigning? And Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, "Oh, it's ridiculous," and moved on. And she's like, "No, it's not a ridiculous question. It's a pretty good question. Has he thought of it? I mean, at this point, with all of the tightening, all of the stories coming out with Mueller, all of the shoes dropping, his own attorney having his office and hotel room and home raided, probably going to end up doing a significant amount of jail time if from what I'm hearing is right. Evidently, this woman, April Ryan, has been getting death threats for asking what is a simple question. And is this how bizarre and how down the path we've gone as a society where you can't ask a simple question, even if you don't like the question? And, I grew up at a time where there was, we were told there's no such thing as a dumb question. There's dumb intent, but there's no such thing as a dumb question. And to me, that's a valid question. Has the president thought about it? Because I've got a lot of people telling me, he's not going to make it to the midterms. He's going to resign. He'll figure out a way to get out of this. There'll be a deal made. He's going to move along. In fact, I've got my one friend who's a spiritualist. She says that, he's not going to make it to the midterm, that he will resign. Evidently, the angels have told her that that's going to happen. And, they predicted he was going to win. So they're predicting he's going to be out. But, the idea that just for asking a simple question, that someone is going to send you death threats. Now, evidently, she said that the network has contacted the FBI and they're going to look into it. But as someone who's gotten these kind of threats, and look, I take them as just people blowing off steam. But you never know. In today's society, when somebody goes off on the deep end with as many guns as we have in our society, you never know. And I look at Vermont, for instance, the Republican governor of Vermont, this guy Phil Scott, who was a gun nut. He's a gun guy, as most people in Vermont are. Look, these are people who are, they're still kind of living like the days of old. Evidently, they have passed some interesting new gun law, some new restrictions on gun ownership, and the gun nuts are losing their minds. I guess Scott signed into law something for new background check requirements, an age requirement on gun purchases, and they've banned bump stocks. And this is one of those things where this guy, he said he had to reevaluate himself. He had to look at his own views on guns after, in his state, there was a high school student who had evidently planned an attack on a high school in Vermont. And you go, maybe when it comes that close to home, you kind of go, maybe we should do something. Maybe some common sense could go around. The idea that an 18-year-old can walk into stores around this country and walk out with an AR-15 or some kind of a weapon. And I know I've heard it all before. They can join the military and they can have guns there. I go, okay, well, there you go. You want a gun? Join the military. Good luck. And don't give me that because we tell 18-year-olds they can't drink alcohol. So I know. But Rick, guns are constitutionally protected. No, they're not. Stop that. At some point, we have to stop that. At some point, we have to come to the realization and go back and read the Federalist Papers and the whole idea behind the Second Amendment and come to some bit of sanity. Sorry, guns were not meant to be in everyone's hands. Well, that's not actually accurate. Everyone over males 18 to 57, they had to have a gun because they were part of the militia. But again, that's another part of the sentence, and we like to ignore that part of the sentence. So good on the Republican governor of Vermont and the people of Vermont there for having some bit of sanity, just a bit. And maybe for some other states will follow. Maybe, who knows? Maybe even the federal government. Yeah, I don't know. Never mind. That was a dumb statement. That's probably the dumbest thing I've said in a very long time, that the federal government's actually going to do something with the power and control that the NRA has. Yeah. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you're going. As always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow. Probably neither of those are actually true. More like Paul was going to get his hat handed to him in November. But just a thought, and here to share some of his thoughts, someone who actually ran in that congressional district and ran against the Iron Stash out there, our good friend David Yankovich. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me tonight, Rick.
So are we surprised that Paul Ryan has taken exit stage left?
I'm not surprised. Are you surprised?
No, I was expecting it. The handwriting's on the wall. You're going to get his hat handed to him. The legacy that you want to leave is of going out on your terms. I get it.
Well, the thing is Paul Ryan had to have seen the writing on the wall. I mean, Randy Bryce had a amazing fundraising quarter where he outraised them. This is the first real threat he's ever had in 18 years, and he's not really the type of guy who's shown a lot of conviction in his career about anything. I'm not surprised in the least that he decided to drop out of the race. And I think that statewide they're seeing the writing on the wall. You have Tammy Baldwin, who's running for reelection for Senate there. They're pouring a lot of money against her. You have the governor's races coming up. We just won a huge Supreme Court race there. that I think that was more than anything else what probably knocked Paul Ryan out, because he realized that he can't win when you win a statewide like that.
So what's he going to do next? I mean, which K Street lobbyist firm, which corporate board, where will he go now with his government pension and his government health care and all of the things that he abhors?
He's probably going to sit on a bunch of boards and, make a ton of money. But, I wonder if he is thinking about running for president one day at some point. He's still a young man, and he's got a lot of charisma, and Paul Ryan, for as monstrous as his policies are and everything else, I mean, I think ultimately he couldn't keep standing up to Donald Trump's agenda and answering, because every time Trump does anything that challenges really anything at all, Paul Ryan has to be the one who answers for it. It's never Donald Trump. His staff has to answer for it, everybody else, but the Republican leadership is the ones who are really getting punished. And this is just another sign that the blue wave is really a real thing, and it's stronger than we thought it was. And, we're scaring a lot of Republicans out of races. I mean, you had Darrell Issa, Mike Levin's district. You have this one here. I mean, all over the country, we're seeing Republicans fold. And it's because, they can't run and can't win on this agenda. So it's easier for them to quit and, go the way of the cowards.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, I would have liked to seen him get beat, though. I mean, because look, I'm really hoping for the blue wave that many people are saying is coming. Because look, the Democrats need to pick up 24 seats to get the House back. I would like to see more than that, and also I'd like to see the Senate. If I could ask for everything, that's kind of what I would like.
Well, the House is the thing is like what people don't realize is it's a lot of work. It's not just magically going to happen. Like, if you're listening to the show tonight, it's up to you. Your one vote is going to be what makes a difference. Like, flipping the House of Representatives is not easy. It's going to be everybody. It's going to be one hell of a fight. And we still have the Senate to do. And we have to defend seats in the Senate. We have to defend all of our seats and win all their seats. So, I mean, like Bill Nelson in Florida is running up against Rick Scott right now. That's going to be a hell of a race. You have the Wisconsin Senate race there with Tammy Baldwin. That's going to be a hell of a race. We have to not only focus on winning seats, we have to focus on defending seats as well, and that's just as important as the ones we win. If we want to do that.
So, are we optimistic? I mean, I've been looking around and I'm seeing numbers that I don't think I've seen in a very long time. Of almost every congressional seat in this country's got a competition. I can't find, maybe you've been able to find it, I can't find an unopposed seat. There have been numbers in the past that, just outrageous. I don't think there are any this year.
Well, Corey Pennebaker always says that, every seat, every election, challenge everything. And he's been fighting for that since he got elected to the DNC in Wisconsin there. And I 100% agree with him. We're fighting on all fronts. I mean, I feel really, really, really good about our chances right now, especially with the Speaker of the House stepping down. The golden boy, the policy wonk, which is funny to me. We're challenging them on every single front that there is to challenge them on. But it's not enough yet. It's not November yet. We have to keep challenging. We have to keep fighting, and we have to organize. The scariest thing to me, and this is a cautionary tale, like Paul Ryan stepping down is more due to his party's dysfunction and really like the devastation of the GOP under the Trump era and who they've become. The Democrats can be that. Like that's the direction that we're heading in if we can't come together. If we can't come together with these issues and find a way to not have these tests done where if someone I disagree with on one issue, I'm not going to vote for them, I'm going to sit home. Like, what we're seeing with what Paul Ryan did or with Darrell Issa or with Flake or with any of them is that, the Republican Party has become so broken that they can't govern or can't do anything. And everybody's like, well, that'll never happen to the Democrats. But what scares me a lot is it can happen, and it has happened. And that's why Donald Trump's president. So we have to find a way to, like, even if we don't agree 100% of the time on all the issues, we have to still back the Democrats in these races to get these races won and done, because I mean, a Democrat right now is going to listen. A Republican in office is not.
Yeah,
and we've seen that, you know.
We've had these conversations in the past where, one of my great fears is we become this banana republic where we swing ideologically from one extreme to the next. And my fear is that, as things don't happen to help the people who really, honestly and truthfully were angry in 2016, and I would argue have a right to be angry. Their government has left them behind on a number of fronts. And we could debate whose fault that is all night long, but if it doesn't get better, I fear that we have these wide ideological swings from one crazy area to the next, and that is not good for stability, not good for the future of this country, and not good for our democracy, especially when you look down the road at all of the problems that are coming up that we're not even anywhere near close to addressing.
I totally agree with you, 100%. I mean, we can't swing all the way to the left, and we can't swing all the way to the right. I mean, where we're at right now is, we're at a fracturing point in this country for sure. I will say that the Republicans who are running for office, they have no desire whatsoever to do what their constituents want. I can't think of one Republican in the country who has shown any kind of backbone or shown any kind of desire to do the right things for their constituents. They completely ignored. Just like this assault weapons stuff and everything that we're going against right now. 90% of the country believes that we need to have tighter, restrictions on assault weapons, but the Republicans won't even hold it to a vote. I don't want to see us go radically right and radically left and radically right and keep doing this over and over again every administration. But on the other hand, the only people who are actually listening to what their constituents want and doing the right things are the Democrats. And I'm not saying that to be partisan. I kind of consider myself a person that if there was a great Republican candidate and a terrible Democratic candidate, I would vote for the Republican. If you had somebody who was like a Donald Trump Democrat, I'm not voting for that guy or that woman.
No, at the end of it, it comes back to that common sense stuff that we talk about all the time. People want to make sure that the jobs that they have, they can earn enough to support their families. They want to make sure that they get good quality health care. Their kids' schools are well run and well stocked and funded. You go down the list, retirement security, there's all of these problems. And, oh, by the way, the need for mass job training coming up very soon. These are all things that have to be addressed. And what's happened is, and I think what the frustration is that you've got these politicians who are fighting over things that we're never going to come to an agreement on. It's just never going to happen. Some of these social issues you're just never going to agree on. And all of the other stuff that we do agree on doesn't get done because we want to hold each other hostage over the things we agree on over the things that we don't. And that's maddening to me.
It's maddening for me too. But what's even worse to me is we as a party aren't holding to our convictions. Everybody in the country, just about everybody would agree that we need to rehaul or reevaluate our medical system. Healthcare is one of the most important issues, if not the most important issue of our time.
Yep.
And, Democrats, they stop the fight before they even get to the mat. And, like Medicare for all, I just had actually a really great conversation with Brian Flynn, who's running in New York 19. And, I was talking with him, and he blew me away in a meeting there because, we were discussing it. And, I said, well, Medicare for all, is not something that's feasible to be done in the next 2 years. And he drops his pen and he looks at me and he goes, we need to stop thinking about what's feasible to be done in the next 2 years. We need to start thinking about what is our conviction? What do we stand for? What are we fighting for?
Yep.
These are people's lives and their livelihoods and everything else. He goes, it doesn't matter if it's feasible in the next 2 years. He goes, it's feasible to get done. He goes, we need to stop, the fight. The Democratic Party as a whole doesn't fight. They show up and they get right to the line, and then they realize, we're probably not going to win this one, so we're just going to walk away.
No.
So we've
had those conversations for a long time, David. That Democrats, they negotiate from what they would accept. and then settle for less than they would accept, instead of what the Republicans do, push the goalpost as far out to the extreme and then settle back. And look, I wish I could move to New York to vote for Brian Flynn. There's a guy who gets it. The last time I talked to him, he said, look, I'm a capitalist. I believe that we should be doing all of these things like Medicare for all, like universal retirement, things that the right would scream socialist. But he's saying we need to do those things because, look, business shouldn't have to. He's like, as a business owner, I want to run my business. I don't want to do all of these other things. And this is where I come back to, this could be a very pro-business kind of platform where the Republicans should come along, because I don't know anybody who owns a business who is thrilled by the fact that they have to deal with insurance companies and financial people to get their employees health care and pensions.
Well, I mean, just like the unions, we know that the reason why 90% of the workforce in the country, and especially unions, don't get raises every single year is because of the rising cost of health care. And here's something that you and I have talked about offline many times, but we've never really talked about it on the show. Within the next 15 or 20 years, automation is going to take over 30 to 40% of the workforce. Some projections are even more than that. So all these arguments we're having right now about, socialism or, lazy people taking welfare or whatever it is, like within, 30 years or 20 years, like half the country is going to be in a place where their jobs were taken over.
Yep.
I mean, you have a surgeon, a machine's going to do that. You're going to have a doctor's office where a general practitioner is really going to be a machine you step into, and they scan your body and tell you what's wrong with you. Your pizza delivery trucks, are going to be completely automated. They're already starting to do it. So I mean, these issues that we're talking about, the socialism and everything else, like within 20, 30 years, every other country in the world is already preparing for this except for us.
Yeah.
The workforce is going to be mostly automated.
No, I took a beating last week over talking about having the audacity to talk about universal basic income, because I think it's something that we have to pursue. And again, I like to remind people it was a very conservative idea. It's Milton Friedman's idea of a negative tax. Any consumer-based economy needs what? They need consumers. And consumers need what? They need disposable income. Getting money into people's hands so that they can live and thrive and survive and also participate in the economy should be something we should be talking about. But you start talking about universal basic income and people start losing their mind. Well, everyone's going to be lazy. No one will work. Well, if there are no jobs, what are you going to do?
I mean, that's the thing. What are we going to do? Every other country in the world that is established and is a first world country is already preparing for this new revolution that's going to happen. The thing is, we're not in the 1700s anymore, the 1800s, where an industrial revolution is going to take 50 or 60 years to complete. Like, we're moving at warp speed. Like, look at, like, right now, I'm standing here talking to you with a smartphone in my hand. 10 years ago, this smartphone really didn't even exist yet. What's going to be in 10 years? We have virtual reality. We have all these different things. Like, we see, like, Toys R Us going out of business in these major shopping centers. Malls are closing everywhere. Like, all of our shopping is going to be done online. Like, everything is going to be automated. And even, like, the machinery at these facilities that pick your order are going to be automated. So, I mean, there's never too soon. Like, I'm not saying that I'm not by any stretch saying that what I'm advocating for here is, 100% foolproof or anything, but we should start having these conversations and we should start really thinking about what the future is going to entail for us.
Yep.
Because it's wildly different than the argument that Fox News and the Republican Party is saying that, we need to, fight for the American worker and we need to do everything here, because the problem is that in the global economy that's coming and the artificial intelligence economy that's coming, it's a whole different ballgame, and we need to start preparing for that and having conversations and having educated discussions with people with, doctorates and PhDs and, that kind of stuff.
We talk about the Industrial Revolution. You go back and you read about that period. It was incredibly disruptive. People, starved. People lost their jobs. They lost everything, and it took us 80 years to adjust to figuring out how to move from an agrarian society to an industrial one. And that happened over a longer period of time. People saw it coming, and it came much slower. This is going to be extremely rapid. I mean, as you pointed out, I remember my first cell phone was a giant bag with an antenna. It had horrible reception, but that was only 20 years ago.
20 years ago. And right now, in the last 10 years, my first cell phone was in 2005, and I bought it from Sprint. my game was Snake. You could play it on your cell phone. And now we have cell phones that can surf the internet, buy things. Like, basically your entire life is in your pocket at any given time. Things are changing so fast. I mean, 10 years from now, I don't even know where we're going to be. But virtual reality is making its place, in this. So I'm assuming that probably you're going to be able to go to virtual reality malls and try on, clothing. And I don't know. I don't know what the future is, but we need to start having conversations about what it's going to be and how we're going to keep up with it with the workforce and an economic standpoint, because those are the real issues.
No,
everything else.
No, it's much easier to argue about Stormy Daniels.
Oh, that's an important issue too. We have the president who's, probably the biggest hypocrite in the history of the universe. That's important. I get it. I understand why the shiny red ball is, distracting everybody. But we have real issues, like real things that are happening. And your health care, that's going to be a major issue. Your, kitchen table stuff with your jobs and the economy, like that's the stuff that matters. And honestly, that's what wins elections. I promise you this. Not one person running for election in 2018 is going to win because they're going against Trump. Not one of them.
Nope.
Anybody whose message is, I am not Donald Trump or I am not the representative I'm challenging, will not win. You have to talk about the issues. You have to talk about how you're going to help people. You can't come to it with just the problem. You have to have the solution too. And it's not going to be based on one person. It's bigger than Trump, as much as he doesn't want to hear that.
No, I agree with you. The other thing that I believe, and maybe you'll disagree with, I believe you have to stand for something. You have to, and it has to be moving us forward and positive. The Republican model of, we're against everything, the party of no, the party of gridlock and obstruction. I think people are tired of this. I want a politician who's gonna believe in the job that they can do, believe in their power to make people's lives better, believe that policy can move us forward, instead of, coming to me with this, we need to restrain and constrict and drown in the bathtub. We need to destroy. That's not flying. We've tried it. It's failed us.
Well, first off, how could I possibly disagree with that? That's 100% right. But you're right. And what we're facing, it's not about one person. It's not about one issue. And if you're a politician and you're out there and you're running, and if you're listening to this, I've been on a couple of campaigns that have done it. We didn't win in Alabama because we talked about, we're not Roy Moore or we're not Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, we didn't talk about Donald Trump at all. We avoided talking about Donald Trump. We didn't want to, we were talking about the issues that real people face. And we banked on the campaign's ability to tell people that we can help you more than anybody else can. You have to stand for something. The first conversation I have with any politician who's thinking about running for office ever is, why are you here? Like, what's worth losing over for you? Like, if you can wake up tomorrow right now and, you have one issue you can have done, but you have to drop out of the race, what would it be? And that's your central issue. That's the one thing you talk about when you're stumping and you're going all over, 15 different counties and you're doing 12-hour days and everything else, is that one thing. What's that one thing that you're standing for? And that's why Randy Bryce is going to win, Paul Ryan stepped down today, but the reason why Randy Bryce is going to win isn't because he's running against Paul Ryan. He's going to win because he's talking about the American worker.
Yep.
He's talking about unions. He's talking like, I've bled, sweat, fought for this district my entire life, and that's why he wins. You have Mike Levin in California is doing the same thing. Brian Flynn, they have issues that they're fighting for and they're passionate about. And that's why that they're going to win these races, because everybody knows it's not about Donald Trump. It's not about the Republicans. It's about, your issues and the things you're going to fight for and how you're going to make people's lives better.
No, I agree. And having those conversations on how we're going to, recreate a prosperous working class. To me, those are important things to go back to. How do families support themselves? How do we make sure that you look all across this country? You've got teachers in the streets because we've allowed our education systems to be defunded right before our very eyes. There's all of this stuff that has to be hashed out in the public square. And I guess my last line of questioning for you is, as a digital strategist, as someone who does what you do, is it possible to have those conversations via social media, given the fact that you've got all this trolling going on, you got people, just shouting past each other platitudes and all of that, or is this something that maybe we have to come back to the public square and face to face, figure out? I'm curious how you see this playing out.
Well, like I tell everybody, social media is not a silver bullet that's going to win you the election. Digital is not going to do it. it's a tool that makes everything else better. You know, you still have to go out to that public square, and you still have to have it out. You know, but social media just captures what happens in that public square and puts it out there to millions of people. What we're looking at and the way things are going right now, we're not gonna be able to just do social media straight. But I will say this, like, most people will never have a chance to have a one-on-one meeting with their congressional representative. Most people will never have a conversation at all or have any contact with them whatsoever. So social media gives you that ability to reach out to way more people than you'd have the ability to do if you were scheduling 30-minute meetings or 15-minute meetings every day. So, you know, for the incumbents and for people running, like, utilize that. Like, you know, you can reach out to people and you can, you know, build a community and everything from that. But nothing will ever take place or take over the place of, like, a representative showing up at someone's kitchen table in their house and listening to the stories that a working class family is going to talk about. So, I mean, it's like I said, social media, it's a tool. It's not a silver bullet. You're not going to win an entire race on social media. It lifts everything else up.
It's going to be an interesting couple of months, indeed, as we try and figure out how we right the ship, as we move back into some bit of sanity. At least that's my hope. David, I always love having you on the program. Look forward to talking to you again.
I appreciate you having me, and it's going to be a really good 2018, but you have to show up, and you have to vote, and you have to fight.
That's the key.
It's going to be good.
Active, engaged, informed, all of that. Thanks so much, David. Good stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Let me know, is the future online, or do we have to talk to each other face-to-face? Love to hear your thoughts. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day New York City transit workers in TWU Local 100 ended their 11-day walkout. The strike occurred in the context of hard times for New York City workers. The city had teetered on the edge of municipal bankruptcy just a few years earlier. Unrelenting inflation and austerity measures against municipal workers had taken its toll. Years of recession meant freezes in hiring and promotions. It also meant increasingly dangerous working conditions. The MTA cut back funding for basic maintenance, investment, and service. Derailments, accidents, and fires were common, and crime soared at stations and bus stops. Transit workers found themselves operating malfunctioning equipment and confronted by frustrated and angry riders. With wages frozen, cost of living adjustments or COLA capped, and the establishment of a 3-tiered pension plan, workers had had enough. They walked out on the first day of the month, demanding a 30% wage increase, quarterly COLA, and increased vacation time. New York City Mayor Ed Koch opposed the workers' demands, fearing any victory for the union would ruin upcoming contract negotiations with the city's 300,000 municipal workers. He also used the strike as an occasion to whip up anti-union sentiment. While the contract was voted up by a 3-1 margin, labor historian Joshua Freeman notes that the 1980 strike ended up in victory that many transit workers saw as a defeat. Workers won a 17% wage increase over 2 years, a 3% cost of living adjustment, and increased contributions to the health and welfare fund. But they also had to concede to reduced breaks, 2-tiered wages, and increased job duties across classifications. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We need to stand united, for undivided we shall never fall. Our sisters and are you and I are win. You and I both know that we can rely on it. The time is prime, planets align, ain't no mistaking. For union resurrection, the anger has.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show.
The sleeping giant.
You know, in talking with David there, you know, he kind of brought up Brian Flynn, a guy who's running for Congress up in the 19th congressional district there in New York. And I've had a number of conversations with him. A real good guy. I mean, somebody I truly hope does well, because it would be great to have someone like him who is a small businessman, who is a labor activist, who is a true progressive in Congress, pushing for ideas. And, you know, one of the things that it's always frustrated me about Democrats is that you have so many moderate Democrats who restrain the negotiating process. And what the Republicans have always done really well is they go, hey, we want to cut off both your legs. And the Democrats go, well, no, I need my legs. How about you just cut off the foot? And the Republicans are like, okay, we'll just take the foot. And they come back 6 months later and they go, you know what? We've decided we want both legs. Well, how about you take the other foot? And they come back 6 months later and it's the same game until eventually they get both legs. The Democrats, they go and, you know, hey, let's push for this. And, okay, well, we didn't get what we wanted. That's good. We did something. And minimum wage is a perfect example of this. When was the last time we pushed for a minimum wage increase seriously? It's been over a decade since the minimum wage was increased. In Pennsylvania, where I'm at, it's been 12 years. And, you know, I know there's some pushes here and there, and I know the Fight for 15 campaign has really been pushing heavily, especially on the local level. But as a political party, how many Democrats do you hear constantly saying, you know what, we need to raise up the bottom. We need to make sure that the folks who are working hard, who are struggling to make ends meet, that, you know what, they somehow get made whole, that they're able to make ends meet. You know, as a party doing that. And this is the kind of stuff that I think David was talking about. We need people who are going to stand up and have vision for the future. And if you don't get to that place, you go, look, we're still working towards it. You know, we have a view, we have an ideology. We want to get to the place where every kid gets a good quality education. Every kid who can go to college, who can do the work, should be able to without being saddled with a lifetime full of debt. Every person who wants a job gets a job, and that job should be able to at least pay for the bare minimums of existence. A roof over your head, food on the table, clothes on your back, basic transportation, or maybe even have some public transportation that's efficient enough to get people around. These are the kind of problems people face every day. And yet our political leaders seem to be mired in this fight over gay marriage, over who can use which bathroom, over, you know, I got to be honest, and sorry for people who are in those moments. That's not the fight going forward. I'm all in favor of equality. We should be pushing equality at every turn. But the parties have been mired in this. They fight over the stuff that we're never going to agree on. And all of the other stuff doesn't happen. Because each party is in control, holds hostage what could get done. It's nuts to me. But again, not surprising given the fact that the moneyed interests, and you go back to it, it comes back to the corrosive effects of money in our politics. The fact that we have created, through lower wages, lower expectations, lower opportunities, we have created the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization, and they are using that wealth that we've created for them and given to them against us at every single turn. And it's time. It's time that, you know, I used to say that the wealth class has all the money, but we've out-procreated them. There are more of us. We're going to go to the polls. Our policies, our vision, our hopes, our dreams, our aspirations, that's what we're going to pursue. But sadly, watching this Republican Party rule the way that they've ruled when they control all the levers of power in only the interests of the very wealthy kind of makes me rethink that. Now, I'm hoping come November, I'm hoping everyone listening and I'm hoping everyone who can vote does, because we have outprocreated them. And hopefully we will talk to each other, and hopefully we will see through the Russian tricks and all of the propaganda and all the euphemistically named front groups who I love dogs and puppies telling you to vote against your best interests. Hopefully we wake up We stand tall, we walk into that voting booth, and we make the right choice. That's the hope. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Dr. Stephen Herzenberg is going to be here to share some of his thoughts on why we need an overtime policy in this country that encourages work and pays people a decent wage. Quick break. Right back.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Greed is good, proclaimed Gordon Gekko, lead character in a 1987 film lampooning the low ethics of the high finance barons of Wall Street. You might think that surely this Hollywood portrayal is a gross exaggeration, but check out an egregious example of Gekko-level greed being pushed by today's Wall Street sharks. Big shot financiers have been going all out to kill a sensible Labor Department rule meant to protect people's retirement accounts from the self-serving guile of financial manipulators. The rule simply requires firms that manage these accounts to put our money in investments expected to produce the best returns for us, rather than in investments that pay the highest interest fees to them. It's hardly harsh to require them to treat us common customers with basic honesty, applying what amounts to a golden rule for bankers. But, howls of outrage exploded from the Wall Street baronies. Lobbyists swarmed into Washington, and scores of lawyers rushed into courts. To defend their right to be dishonest, the greed-fueled bankers resorted to more dishonesty, claiming that the fiduciary rule would hurt, quote, smaller investors. Huh? Well, they prevaricated, only by misdirecting small retirement savers into high-fee investments can we make enough profit to give, quote, affordable financial advice to workaday folks. Again, huh? These banks are wallowing in unconscionable levels of profits, but the only affordable advice they want to offer us is bad advice, funneling our retirement stash into deals that benefit them at our expense. This is Jim Hightower saying bankers claiming that they have a legal right to profit by cheating their own customers is a level of gluttony so gross that it would even gag Gordon Gekko. For more information, go to consumerfed.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Everything's raising but the wages. Everything's raising but the wages. Gasoline, groceries, and our wages. Everything's raising but the wages.
Ah, yes, Reverend Peyton and his big damn band. It's true. Everything is raising but the wages. And I love their other song, too, Walmart Killed the Country Store. Look it up. Good stuff. But he's right. Look, as we talked about last night, I had one person say, look, if had wages and productivity continued to walk hand in hand, maybe that elusive single-family income to raise a family could be had once again. And I would argue there's a bunch of policies that go along with that, like the overtime rule that President Obama tried to get moving forward, that this administration is, in the process of crushing. And here to share some of his thoughts on what we should be doing and, where we are. I've asked our good friend Dr. Stephen Herzenberg to come talk with us. He's the executive director of the Keystone Research Center. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
Happy to do it, Rick.
So where are we right now? I mean, the Obama-era rule was to raise the threshold from, if I remember right, $23,660 a year to be considered salaried management exempt from overtime. Obama wanted to take it up to, I think, like 47-something.
Yeah.
Where are we now with that?
So I'm going to quote this pro-worker source called Fortune magazine, which is a business publication, and it's from January. It says how Trump is letting businesses steal money from workers. So what they're saying is, U.S. Department of Labor, if you go back to the 1930s, sets requirements to make sure that people who work overtime are paid for it. So, again, from the beginning of U.S. minimum wage and overtime laws 80 years ago, there was this basic idea that basically people paid hourly or paid sort of modest salaries as salaried workers should get overtime. You know, we believe in the 40-hour week.
Sure. And now the idea of overtime was not just to get you a little bit of extra money. It was meant as a deterrent to not work people to death and maybe to hire other people.
Exactly right. So you can go back and be with your family, which is more important than ever now, because people are both partners are working and they got kids, and so you don't want to work 50 or 60 hours a week, or you're a single parent. Yeah, exactly right. So
we should all be like Paul Ryan and get to have some time to spend with our family.
Exactly right. So I mean, again, this is Fortune magazine saying Obama administration wanted to change the rules to make sure we had rules from the 40s to the mid 70s, where basically every time the minimum wage went up, basically half or 60%, most salaried workers would get overtime pay below a certain salary. So if you work 50 hours, you get paid time and a half for the last 10.
Right.
And so
when did it go awry, Steve? I mean, look, we get that. Yeah. I mean, back in the 70s, the threshold was much higher. Management was making much more money.
Well, like everything else, it went awry in the 80s, right? I mean, so with Reagan, right? So basically, the scales were tipped against workers, basically starting in the early 1980s with Reagan. So everything was for trickle down, and the minimum wage wasn't going up anymore, and the salary below which all workers, salaried or hourly, would get overtime pay, that kept coming down and down and down. So you went from a situation where 60% of workers would get overtime pay, 60% of salaried workers would get overtime pay back in 1975 to less than 10% currently.
Wow.
So the Obama administration wanted to change that, and they wanted, if you're a shift manager at McDonald's, so you're basically working the cash register, but you're the person who closes the door, or you're a department manager at a retail store. Again, a lot of the time you're just serving customers, or you're a team leader in a manufacturing plant, right? Again, you're working the line, but you got a little more say when it comes to something goes wrong, what you're going to do about it, right? So there's just these salaried workers, lower paid salaried workers, are people who really make our economy hum. These people work really hard, and again, in the good old days, they had a 40-hour week, and if they worked 50 hours, they got paid overtime for that last 10 hours. Or if they worked 60, they got paid for the last 20 hours.
But what they didn't have back then, though, Steve, were cute little name tags. I mean, that says assistant manager.
They weren't always called an associate,
No, I hate to be facetious, but the reality is that seems to be what it is. All you get is the little nameplate with assistant manager or like you said, team leader or whatever, and you get all of the what dumped on you. Yeah. And look, I've met a couple of these folks who make like $27,000 a year working 60 hours a week because someone missed their shift, so they had to stay.
Yeah. And they are the glue. I mean, you could they are, whether it's a nonprofit in some cases, or again a franchise, or a big business, or a manufacturing plant. I mean, these are people who have a sense of responsibility. And again, you stay that extra 5 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours. I mean, you're someone who's pulling your weight. You're working hard and playing by the rules, but the rules are being turned against you. Yeah. So again, I can't do a lot better than Fortune magazine.
No, I mean, Trump, that hippie liberal publication. Sure, you're absolutely right.
How Trump is letting businesses steal money from workers. Let your audience go online. You Google that, how Trump is letting businesses steal money from workers. But here's the good news.
We'll tweet it out.
The good news for Pennsylvania is that Governor Wolf wants to change this. Back in January, he said he's going to change this, and I mean, if Trump had done what he should have done, which is pursue the Obama policy and challenge the Texas court that derailed what Obama wanted to do. 12.5 million, workers nationally who would, with that one change, suddenly be eligible for overtime. Nearly 500,000 workers in Pennsylvania. So no, Trump couldn't fight for that. He ran on, hey, people are tired of the economy being rigged against them. And again, no, he says, let's keep letting businesses steal money from workers. So the good news is Governor Wolf figured out rightly that this is something that under Pennsylvania law, he can change through his own action. It's going to take time.
Right.
It's going to take regulations. The Obama rule took a year or two to put in place. So, this is economic justice postponed and delayed. But Governor Wolf wants to get this done by the beginning of 2020. And he's basically announced in the middle of January that he's got a rule that he's got a change in the Pennsylvania regulation that will be similar to what Obama's rule would have done. So nearly 500,000 Pennsylvania workers, those team leaders, those shift managers, those department managers will be eligible for overtime. And again, it's up to the employer. The employer can say, hey, I don't want to pay you overtime, so you're only working 40 hours from now. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. But what do you say to the person, Steve, who goes, now you're just making Pennsylvania uncompetitive? All those jobs are just going to flee, Steve. They're going to go to Ohio or Maryland or New York or New Jersey or.
Well, they're not going to New York because New York already has these rules. So
now you're killing the talking point, Steve.
Sorry. I was confusing you with facts. They're not going to New Jersey because again, wages. This is a very small. In the end, this is really important to the people who are being cheated out of their overtime pay or cheated out of the time with their family, or cheated out of again the 40-hour, the 8-hour day and the 40-hour week are something that at least I associate with the beginning of the 20th century.
Yep.
So like we're really walking back. I cannot believe we're really walking back on the 40-hour week. Come on.
Yeah, well, look, we're undoing the entire 20th century. Why not that part of it?
Yeah,
and you go back to, as you point out, the call was 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what you will, and that what you will today is a second job.
Yeah, right.
Or no overtime working as a salaried employee. And
again, you made it very concrete. A lot of this is when other workers don't show up, or these are the folks that are plugging the holes and picking up the slack and pitching in when no one else will, right? I mean, these are the most deserving. These are middle class workers from making $25,000 or $24,000 a year to $50,000 a year. None of these people, even Obama's rule was if you're making $48,000 above, hey, the company can work you 60 hours a week and you just get your $48,000. But they're from $24,000 a year to $48,000, which is sort of in the range of you can't possibly support your family, or maybe you can just about support your family. Those hard-working people who are the glue of lots of profitable corporations, some nonprofits as well, you're really going to cheat them. Yeah, and that's been our policy. So
right.
The reason this is an issue in the last week or two across the country is that there's an estimate nationally of how much money workers lose, and there's a little online ticker on the website of the Economic Policy Institute, and that on April 1st, April Fool's Day, that passed $500 million. So that means that because the Trump administration, beginning last October, chose not to challenge the court decision, chose not to defend the Obama administration position that workers below a very modest salary who work overtime should get paid for it, that here's the money that's being lost across the country by those 12.5 million workers.
And just think about that, what kind of a stimulus that would be to our economy if those middle-income folks had that $500 million extra disposable dollars.
Absolutely, and 22 million and counting in Pennsylvania. So we've got online at our KeystoneResearch.org, we got an online ticker now that's showing how much money Pennsylvania workers have lost already, And so, again, there's a bunch of states. So, again, New York and California already have these basic fairness rules.
Right.
For salaried workers that are below a very modest salary should get overtime pay.
Right. So how do we make Pennsylvania the third one?
So that Governor Wolf wants to do that. We may be beat by Ohio, which has some legislators pushing for something. They had an event last week with they're going to do it through legislation because Governor Kasich doesn't want to do this the way that Governor Wolf does through regulation. Colorado's trying to move this. There are rumors, I hope I'm not outing anyone here, but New Jersey, which has a progressive Governor Murphy now and also a progressive legislature, they're likely to move something like this. There's discussions about this in Washington State. So, again, this is one of these things where, there's a real positive move for workers to lift wages like the minimum wage. But here's the contrast in Pennsylvania. I think 29 states now have a minimum wage above the federal level, including all 6 states that surround Pennsylvania. We don't. And we don't because that's on our legislature. That's our legislature with its Republican majority. They have to take action. Governor Wolf has been calling for a higher minimum wage for his 3+ years in office.
Yeah, it's been 12 years since the last time Pennsylvania raised the minimum wage, 2006. Last year, Ed Rendell was the governor at the time.
Exactly, and so, but here's the difference on this overtime rule on middle class or modestly paid salaried workers who work overtime should be paid for overtime. That's something that Governor Wolf can lead on, and so that's why he's starting in January. He's committed publicly to moving this through regulations, and so Pennsylvania is, at least as far as I know, the third state in the union to sort of say it's going to move a policy like this. New York and California, again, already have it
good stuff
in place. And so, and the thing that's happened here, and this is deliberate, and we and groups like ours are encouraging this across states, but is Governor Wolf's action is leading folks like Governor Murphy in New Jersey, folks like the legislators in Ohio, folks like the legislators in Colorado, governors like the progressive governor in Washington State. This is like the minimum wage, but this is not just for folks at the bottom end. This is for folks right in the middle, something that state governments, since the federal government isn't going to do it because, as Fortune magazine says, Trump is letting businesses steal money from workers. So states are going to step up and help that, hard-working 40, 45, 50, 55, 60 hours a week worker and their family. States are going to step up. And again, Governor Wolf deserves credit for doing this in Pennsylvania and contributing to a wave of state initiatives to lift up the middle class in this way.
Absolutely good stuff. And this is something Republicans should come on board with because it does return reward to work. Because as you point out, these are the people who are working their behinds off, week after week, day after day. They should be rewarded with being at least able to have their work rewarded. It's that simple. Steve?
Absolutely. This should be a bipartisan thing. These absolutely are people who work hard and play by the rules.
Yep. Good stuff, Steve. I appreciate it, man.
All right. Take care.
Always good talking to our friend, Dr. Stephen Herzenberg. Good stuff. You want to check out their stuff? Keystone Research.org is the website. You can check out that stuff there. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
This is why we fight, why we lie awake. This is why we fight.
Finally, radio for the rest of us. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that labor organizer Frank Norman disappeared from the Lakeland, Florida area and was never heard from again. It's believed he was kidnapped and murdered by members of the Ku Klux Klan. Norman was organizing citrus workers in the northern part of the state. The citrus groves, cigar factories, and textile mills in the area maintained a highly segregated workforce. The Klan terrorized workers and labor organizers that dared to disrupt this segregation by attempting to organize workers across racial lines. Klan members marched in parades through workers' neighborhoods and burnt crosses near union meetings. The next year, another union organizer, Joseph Shoemaker, was kidnapped by the Klan. Shoemaker had come to Florida from Vermont to organize cigar workers. 44 Klan members took Shoemaker and 2 other men 14 miles into the woods outside of Tampa. Shoemaker's leg was plunged into boiling hot tar. He was beaten and tortured and left for dead. When he was found, doctors tried to save his life by amputating his leg. But after 9 agonizing days, he died from his injuries. The investigation into the crime showed collaboration between the Klan and the local police. 5 policemen were convicted and sentenced to just 4 years in jail for their role in the terror attack. But the next year, their sentences were overturned and they were released. No one was ever held accountable for the murders of Norman or Shoemaker. These 2 men and countless others forgotten by history gave their lives trying to organize workers and stand up for racial justice. The Klan terrorized union organizers across the South in states like Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. Are you fascist?
I remember back when President Obama first put out this executive order, this change of the regulation to up, which is perfectly within his ability to do, to up the minimum number to be considered salary exempt. And right now it's $23,660 a year. I mean, stop and think about that for a second. You could work 100 hours a week for $23,000 a year. It's nuts. It's completely and totally insane. And it's something that at some point you have to go, it's just kind of crazy. They wanted to move it up to 40, I think it was 47.4, which seems somewhat reasonable. That if you wanted to work someone to death, you had to pay him a reasonable salary. And if you didn't have to. You don't have to use the salaried exempt employee. You can have an hourly employee. You work 40 hours. And if you work them over, you still pay them $23,600 a year. You can cut that $23,600 up into 40 hours and 52 weeks a year, and you can pay them the hourly wage. And if you wanted to work them 60 hours one week, you just paid them the overtime for those extra 20 hours. And you probably wouldn't get to 47.4. You would just have to do a little bit more bookkeeping and a little bit more record keeping, but you wouldn't have to pay the higher wage. And the right wing lost their mind. This is going to kill business. It wouldn't affect business at all if they just chose to say, you know what, you're going to work 40 hours. And it's mind-blowing to me that that there was so much blowback, especially from working people. I mean, I'm often struck by people telling me, well, we can't raise the minimum wage. It's going to be too costly. The price of a hamburger will be $20. Where you look at other countries, like Australia, where the minimum wage for a fast food worker is like $16, $18. And yet their hamburgers aren't $20. We've got it in our head, and we've been trained to think in this way that if we ask for too much, that somehow everything's going to fall apart. And it's something I struggle with, in that I get one guy who emails me all the time. Anytime I talk about minimum wage, so I'm expecting it now. Anytime I talk about minimum wage, he goes, well, why don't you just raise it to $100 an hour? And you go, that's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous because the vast majority of working people in this country don't make $100 an hour. But boosting it up to, I don't know, 10, 11, 15, not completely unheard of. And actually, it would help our economy a little bit as well for a couple reasons. One, we wouldn't be paying as much money out in social programs because guess what? A lot of the social programs we have, like Medicaid and food stamps and cash assistance, are to people who have these low-wage jobs that are paying that are paying just minimum wage with few hours, or unstable hours, or all of the problems that come with low-wage work. If you bump that up to a living wage, you wouldn't have all of those safety net programs feeding into it and propping up low-wage employment. They'd be paying for themselves. And you've got to make it to a point where workers' lives are actually getting better. And this again comes back to November. Why November is so important and why issues like overtime, minimum wage, safety on the job, why these are all important, really important policies and things that have to be discussed and have to be hammered out. And Democrats have to have positions on them. It's just, in my view, it's just that simple. Now remember, the Republicans who they're dead set against any of that stuff. In fact, there have only been two presidents since the minimum wage law was passed in 1935. Only two that haven't passed it. Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama. Ronald Reagan did it because Ronald Reagan didn't want to do it. Barack Obama wanted to, but had a recalcitrant GOP who just said, nope, we're not doing it. No wage increases for you. And that's why we are where we are. Scary stuff, I tell you. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Share some of those thoughts with me. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast, get the app on the smartphone, take the program on the go wherever you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show.